Evening, ladies and gentlemen. You guys ready? I'd like to call the Tuesday, September 9th, 2014 Community Redevelopment Agency Board meeting to order at 5:07 p.m. Roll call, Madam Clerk.
Board Member Burgess. Here. Board Member Fairclough.
Here.
Vice Chairman Shelley.
Here.
Chairman Porter.
Here. Item 3, additions, deletions, or deferrals. None. Approval of the minutes, tab 1. For approval. There's second?
Second.
Moving and seconded. All in favor? Aye. Motion carries. Tab 2.
Tab 2 is a resolution of the Board of the Community Redevelopment Agency of the City of Homestead, Florida, approving the Community Redevelopment Agency budget for fiscal year 2014-2015 and directing the city manager or his designee to submit the budget to Miami-Dade County and the City Council for their respective approval, providing for an effective date.
Mr. Manager, Mr. Rick.
Good evening, Chairman, members of the board. It's a pleasure to be before you again for our budget approval. This is the budget for fiscal year 14-15. I do have a brief presentation. If at any time you have any questions, please don't hesitate to interrupt, and there'll be some time at the end. I know most of you are familiar with the trends that we've had in the CRA over the past few years. I want to briefly go through our revenues and our expenses. As you know, our tax incremental revenues have taken a bit of a hit in the past 6 or 7 years. And this graph shows that in 2010 we had $4.2 million in TIF revenue. In fiscal year 2015, we approximate $1.8 million in TIF revenues. Now, this does have some good news in it. Last year, we took a 22% decrease in our TIF revenue. This year, we're seeing an increase of about $34,000. I have mentioned before to this body that historically underperforming areas of any community are the last to reap the benefits of a booming economy, and they're the hardest hit when the economy does falter, and then they're the last to rebound. And, you know, that's been played out here in the city of Homestead. Last year, the city's assessed values did go up. Unfortunately, in the CRA area, they did not. This year, we're seeing that upwards trend, so we do have some hope for the future. The next slide shows our total funding for the year. $1.8 million in tax incremental revenues, interest on investments of $43,000, and other $725,447 for a total of $2,594,076. This is something that we're going to need to discuss. The number other are cash reserves that the CRA has. We've used this money every year since I've been here to balance our budget. This year, we do have some good news. This number is about $85,000 less than we've had to do last year. Last year was about $810,000. That being said, to fund all of the programming that we want to fund this year, we've had to use this alternate funding source in excess of $700,000. Our expectation is these funds are not going to be available in the following year. So we're going to have to sit down and have a conversation about how we allocate our resources, not in this fiscal year, but the following fiscal year. And just for, I guess, clarity, we've had this discussion every time that I've come up before you since I've been in the city of Homestead. So we've been saying, you know, we're okay for now. Eventually, we're going to have to really make these decisions, and we're going to be coming up on that relatively soon. But again, you're seeing an increase in our TIF revenue, a decrease in what we've had to use to balance this budget. So hopefully the impacts, if we have a good year next year, won't be as severe as we feared in the past. This next slide shows a breakdown of how we expend the funds. We have about $1.2 million in programming. That programming includes our grants, our community policing, and our beautification programs. We have about $363,000 in hero debt. We have about $390,000 in employee costs, $330,000 in administrative costs. Within that number is $110,000 cost allocation that we pay to the city for the services of the city that we use, which includes procurement, finance, fleet, all of those different services that we provide. And it also includes our insurances on the buildings that we own, that sort of thing, any maintenance that we have. On the programming side, we're recommending this year $100,000 for our housing rehabilitation program. In the past fiscal year, you've awarded about $100,000 in grants in this program, including multifamily and single-family residents. We are recommending that next year we forego the multifamily and focus on the single-family because we have limited funds for next year. So we have $100,000 allocated for housing rehabilitation. This is the program that we run in conjunction with CDBG. So our goal is to maximize the CDBG money before having to use the TIF, but in the CRA, if they're requesting something that CDBG cannot pay for, but the TIF revenue can, we allow them to allocate that money there. The next program is our commercial enhancement program. We are recommending this year something a little bit different because I think we have some unique circumstances in the downtown. The city is making a significant investment on Washington Avenue with the construction of City Hall. I believe it's about a $25 million investment. We are suggesting that we take the $200,000 that we're budgeting this year and we focus that on the current retail that is on Washington Avenue that is parallel to where the new City Hall is going to be. I think we do this year so that when the new City Hall opens, we have both sides of the street with new facades. For example, there's been discussions about all the bars that are on the windows. How do we make that go away? And are there different windows that we can use and that sort of thing? So our goal is to work with the landowners to get their buy-in so that we could do the entire block. And if this program is successful, and there are other communities that do this block by block, we can look at other parts of the CRA and see if it's more efficient to use our money in a targeted, coordinated way where we'll go to other blocks in the city and say, all right, maybe there's a block on Southwest 4th Street that we're just going to focus on this block and take all of those businesses and say, listen, we're going to help you. We want you to make some upgrades. So that's our recommendation. And any feedback that you have, we'd like to hear, but that's how we think this could be most effective next year. The next program are our grants for non-for-profits. This is $100,000. This is the exact same amount that we have just allocated for this past year. We have a recommendation coming from the committee for 4 applicants. We feel that, we wish we had more money to do this. There are a lot of people who are deserving, but considering the implications on our budget, we fought to keep this as status quo. Next program are community policing. You're all familiar with this program. It's $494,000 for 2 police officers and 2 code compliance officers. The next program is our neighborhood beautification, $323,000. This includes ground maintenance on all of the properties that the CRA owns, plus all the right-of-ways in the CRA, plus 2 trustee crews that do litter removal, graffiti removal, and ancillary maintenance within the CRA. And that is basically the breakdown of the budget, and I'm here to answer any questions that the board members may have.
Any questions from the board?
Absolutely. Thank you so very much. I've gone through this budget, Mr. Executive Director, and let me first commend you and your staff for such due diligence in which you have put together this budget. But I have some major concerns, as I do every year. I'd like to ask, first off, what is the percentage of the administration? What's the percentage part of it? I understand that you're going from 4 full-time employees to 3 full-time and 1 part-time. And then most of that, I'm asking, your travel and training, that you have 4,000 that was actually spent, but you're proposing 10,000 this year, and that the adopted budget last year was $8,330 on page 49 of my budget book under administration. What is your percentage to be used for this administration?
For the administrative costs, the employee costs would be,
It's a total of 1,092,366 for administrative. What percentage of that, of this particular budget cycle of 2.5 million in expenditures?
we consider, when you look at
That's
that
about-
budget,
What,
the way that.
48%,
Right.
46% in administration?
No, because we consider the community policing to be programmatic and not administrative.
So
So when you look at our administrative costs, when you look at the salary of the CRA employees, it's about 15%.
right, but what I'm saying is overall, if you took, if we did like what the parks have done, they gave, police department gave back parks, certain parks back to the police department, because that they're upping the officers in the area, could it be perhaps that we may use more money for projects? Could we not offer one back to the police department to take on and reduce that cost? Have you all looked at that? Because we're paying for 2 officers, and for 2 officers is about 494,000, inclusive of all of their overtime and longevity pay and their employee, general employee pension and police pension, and the lease payment of $14,000. Can we, at some point in time, so that we can get some more projects and more improvement within them? Because it's my understanding that without the some of this things that we have in here, I see that you've taken out the landscaping grants. We spent 65,000. Now we don't have it budgeted at all. We have 0 for this upcoming proposal year. But you had contingency last year for 0. But this year you have $25,759 in contingency. And parking facility, you have 2,000. Now you're up to 75,000. What is the rationale behind that? You had capital improvement programs at 126,000. Now you're down for this proposal to 35,000. What is your philosophical reasons for your adjustments in the actually for your improvements or your projects?
Okay, I'll take those one by one.
Thank you, sir.
The landscaping program has now been folded into the housing rehabilitation program. So those landscaping dollars are within the 100,000. If you recall, a few months ago when we incorporated the CDBG, we took our different grants and combined them into one $15,000 limit per house. And that includes, we used to have 10,000 for residential and 5,000 for landscaping. So we put those together so the public actually has the opportunity to get the same dollars for the same things. So that's included in our housing rehabilitation budget. The parking structure, as you know, when the city went out and talked about the GOB bond for the police station and the Seminole Theater, the concept of a parking garage was a critical part of that discussion. That's an infrastructure piece in the downtown, and that money is in the budget in case the city or the CRA board moves forward with that. So we wanted to make sure that we had some funding available since it was such an important part of our discussions with the public. We wanted to make sure we had the ability to follow through on that if possible. Whether or not the full amount of that money gets used, I cannot tell you right now. I just didn't want the CRA to be in a position where they couldn't do that. As far as the community policing, it's a conversation we've had. I've had it with you, Councilman. We've had discussions here at the dais, the 2 police officers and the 2 code enforcement officers. If the city wants to keep those services, but they don't want the CRA to pay for it, it's an impact on the general fund. And we've always had a philosophy here of, and you'll see this when the manager does his budget proposal.
Well, what I'm
of-
saying is that all we're doing is shifting areas of cost to its appropriate place, whereby at one point in time, the city was not in a position to be able to afford the police officers and the code officers, so it was shifted in, this prior to you getting here, shifting into the CRA to help underwrite the cost. But now, since we are at a point to where they're adding responsibilities and shifting, we've shifted the parks, certain parts back into the parks department from the police department, then shouldn't we at some point in time be shifting public safety out of the CRA? Because either way it goes, it's still going to be covering the area. We're not saying that they're not going to be neglected, or all I'm saying is, can it be shifted so we can have some more projects to be done? Because I see there's no monies for street improvements within the proposed budget in which you have solicited to us tonight.
Yes, we had also looked at how the CDBG funding for sidewalks, for example, on Maori, they can take up the slack because we have had some issues and some pressures on our budget. So again, CDBG was approved to do sidewalk improvements specifically on Maori and in other parts of the CRA area, and so that work's still going to get done. It was just a different funding mechanism.
So let's have a conversation then about your definition of administration versus operational, because it's under these categories that they're all in one. But you're saying orally tonight in your presentation that actually you don't consider it to be administration, you consider it to be operational. So what makes it administration different from operational if you're having the same expenses as it relates to wages and salary and all of this other stuff?
Oh, because we've always considered the community policing program as a program. For example, if we were doing counseling for youth, and it was a program to keep youth off of the street where they had one-on-one counseling, and I had to have 3 or 4 counselors that we contract in to do it. That would be considered a program and a program expense, not considered an administrative expense. So we've just used the same philosophy in this. It's a program for us to offer supplemental services in the CRA.
Councilman, if I could speak to that point, if I may.
Absolutely.
I think Rick would be the first one to tell you that he would love to move those expenses over to the general fund side. And I think I would agree with you that in the long term that that's the ideal. Unfortunately, you all have 2 pockets. You got the CRA pocket and you got the general fund pocket. And so the choice is discontinue the program completely, keep it in the one pocket, or move it over to the other pocket. What we're saying this year, like we've had for the last couple of years, is that there really isn't any leeway in this general fund budget in order to make that shift.
But here's what I'm saying, in your supplementary budget that was sent to me last night via email, where it lists the descriptions of the budget and its narrative form, which detail how many positions will be available. We're adding on new officers, but as I have stated every year, that the CRA is continuing to dwindle, and more of the operational and administrative costs is taking over 50% of its budget. So you have less than 20, 30% or so going to what the plan is for the CRAs to help to eliminate blight, to help redevelop the area. And if you have less going to that purpose and more going to the cost of running the agency and these other added expenditures, that means there's less money to be for brick and mortar, is what I'm trying to say. And so every year it gets lower and lower and we have $1.4 million going to operating and administrative costs, and we have only $900,000 going to programmatic programs.
I think it really is,
And that's, to me, is a problem because I don't see the objective of its mission being realized, knowing that we have an expired time with this community development agency.
at risk of sounding like I disagree with you, because I don't. I agree with you that at some point the general fund needs to be handling those expenses. I just want to make one distinction here, and that is that unlike some of the, quote, administrative costs, like the person that processes applications so that grants can be given out, if that person doesn't get paid and that person doesn't show up to work, then we can't process the
But I'm not talking
applications.
about, I'm not talking about that.
No,
I'm
no, but
talking
I'm-
about public
that-
safety.
right, that's
I'm
what I'm
talking
saying.
about,
Right.
there's a piece in here that deals that doesn't matter if they're not
Right,
coming to
but
work.
the-
They're gonna come to.
But let me
Let me
just make-
finish though, let me finish. You're comparing apples to oranges. And I'm saying that I'm talking about the public safety piece that's in here that I've been talking about for years. How do we slowly, if there's one officer or one code enforcement going over it once a year, then that will, I'm not saying do it all at one time, but phase it out, phase it, and so that it's not a dramatic piece. So, at some effort and time, because it really just doesn't make sense to me to have the community redevelopment agency and 60% of its cost or 70% of its cost is going for administration and operation, and the other 30% is going to what it should be going to. So I'm just trying to put more money back into where it needs to be. That's all.
Yeah, and if I could, that's really the piece that I was trying to compare, is that I, on the one side, the person that processes the applications, we see as administrative. As you look at the police program, that really is a standard of service. And so if that's something that you could discontinue and the organization could operate, whereas if they cancel their payments for electricity or for phones, they won't be able to operate. And so from the policy decision would be, do you want that enhancement of service in the area? And then if the answer is yes, then who pays for it? Your point is well taken, and I think all three of us agree, and many of your colleagues agree, at some point it's the general fund. But at this point, I can't recommend any transition because there is very little wiggle room in this year's budget for additional, and also the 5 officers that you see in this budget really are the 5 officers that were funded in last year's budget. As you'll recall, last year, we were trying to get grant money to fund those 5 police officer positions, and we had mentioned to you all that if we don't get the funding approved, then we'll come back to you for a budget amendment. So we came back with the budget amendment, the budget was amended, and this year's budget shows the 5 on the books because it's basically bringing this year's budget in alignment with the adjusted last year's budget. And that's why those 5 show up. And it's also the main reason why you only see 1 additional position in this year's budget. Trust me when I tell you, almost every department head has come to me and asked for more staff. And they all say, we don't have enough to do with what we're doing. And it has been very tough, and they've been very understanding, but this budget is very tight because of the fact, and we'll get to the budget presentation later, but just so I can tell you, I agree with your point, other than the timing of when the transition takes place.
Right, what I'm saying is that my comments every year has been the same, but there has been no action or plan. So what I'm asking is, what plan do you propose? And I just given you a suggestion. How do we begin to phase it out to a point to where it is not a devastation of it, but we begin at least trying to phase every other year or something of that sort, so there can be more programmatic monies available for projects in the much needed area. And to be honest with you, when it comes to the CDBG, though my understanding was that it will be used to add more things, not to necessarily cover or bring into fold, as my understanding of bringing into fold with the CDBG monies for administrative to less cost, and then to be able to be put into some of these other programs that we had to make it available for the entire city to take advantage of, not necessarily that continue to be restricted, in which I'm hearing tonight in his presentation. That's all I'm asking.
A point well taken, and I can, also, Mayor, I can address some of that in the budget presentation as well, because I know several of you have spoken about this over the years, and it's definitely on our radar screen, and I can address it in greater detail at the budget presentation.
Yeah. Okay. I'll reserve the rest of it.
Any other
Ma'am.
questions from the board members? Vice Mayor?
Thank you, Mayor. Just to reiterate, I think, again, we do this every single budget hearing cycle as Councilman Williams leads the charge, and I always follow up and say, I echo his comments. And I do again, and that is that, the community policing and beautification, it's great to have, but it is a general fund obligation. It's something that should be provided by that, not by the CRA, because again, I echo what Councilman Williams says, and that is, the purpose of the CRA is to revitalize. And although the community policing and beautification make it nicer, it doesn't necessarily, it's not a project or something that I think that makes as big of an impact as I envision the CRA supposedly making that impact in the community. And so I've had the concern every single budget cycle as well. Now it looks like next year, we have no choice to make that decision because we're not going to have enough money. But at the same time, it's probably $500,000 worth of coverage. So we may get removed, but then we don't have any additional programming because we're out of monies potentially as well. So it's one of those vicious cycles that just kind of keeps repeating itself. And although next year we'll rectify it, we still won't really have any additional monies for projects, so we're not any farther ahead than we were before. So it's just, again, echoing the concern and trying to figure out a solution. I understand there's no money, and so I get it, but at the same time, it doesn't make me happy. So I just wanted to put it on the record and kind of repeat the cycle again.
Anything else? Anyone else? Rick, just one, kind of a question from my perspective. The wealth of the CRA is predicated on the values of the property or additional properties built, correct? So
It's predicated on the assessed value and the millage rate.
if there's more buildings, there's going to be obviously some increase in the values of the property down there. Now, when the city hall is going to be built there, it's not going to actually impact because it's off the tax roll, but it should increase property values around, so we should see an increase there. Subsequent police department, subsequent, I guess what I'm getting at is the more brick and mortar, the higher the ability of the CRA to grow in value, as in less programs, and that that has a negative connotation to some programs. But if you want to actually redevelop and increase the dollars in the CRA, it really needs to be in more structures, more buildings.
We need to see an increase in the property values, and you have that by improving the land, or you have a lot of sale of land in a competitive market. So that's how you get those assessments, each yearly sale. So if one is sold for $100,000 one year, and the next year it's sold for $200,000, we get $90,000, and we get the increase, 90% of the increase. So we haven't, hopefully, as the TIF revenues we've seen starting to tick up, and we see more sale of property, more improvement of property, you're going to see an increase in the assessed value for us. And that also has to do with what the county does with their millage rate, because that affects us as well. It's not just the city budget, it's the county. So if they roll back their rate or they lower their taxes, we have less money.
Any other questions? I'm going to open up the public hearing at this time. This is a public hearing. Anyone would like to speak for or against anything to do with the CRA budget, you're welcome to speak now. I see nothing, so I'll close the public hearing. Any final comments from the board?
Thank you
Mr.
so very
Williams?
much, Mayor. Yeah, let me ask a few more questions, then I'm done. Once you make this presentation, it goes before the county, Rick? When you go before the county?
That really depends on when they schedule the TIF committee meetings and then the hearings, so it's a little dependent on them. Once this is approved, it has to be approved by the 30th of September. We send a budget book to the county for their committee review, and then they tell us when we come and present. It has to go through TIF committee, budget management, and then full county commission.
Because what I'm hearing and seeing, I'm hearing the city manager, I'm hearing you, but when I see things like cost allocation to the general fund from the CRA, and also a shift with the public safety piece of 500,000, 400, almost 500,000, when you add those two totals up, it comes to about almost, what is that, almost $600,000 just from public safety and the general allocation to the general fund. And so, I guess I struggle with the problem of so much that's going to these different entities, but I'm not seeing results of such benefits. So I guess, like on the public safety, it says lease payment of $14,000 for what? What's the lease payment?
I believe that's for the vehicles.
That's for the vehicles. Okay. And what was your justification as relates to the administration fees of $14,000 to $11,000? What's your justification?
The administration fees to the county?
Is that what that is?
Yes.
Okay. All right. And the piece in here, let me talk about these nonprofits for a moment. What is the philosophy of these nonprofits, and who have, we've given monies to these nonprofits, and to who?
In general, the nonprofit committee receives the applications. They score them based on certain criteria. We looked at our plan and the areas that we're supposed to be focused on, which include social institutions, increase in employment, historic preservation. There's about 7 different categories.
Right.
And
who have we given monies to?
We have, over the years, we have given monies to Main Street, to Art South, to the Historic Museum, to SOS, to Weed and Seed, to a few other known nonprofits, as well as Fresh Start. There have been numerous ones since I've been here.
And then through your analyzing of them, what have been the impact on the community that has been positive, in a note that has been change-worthy, that the people know that the monies of these nonprofits that they're getting from the CRA, what has been the actual, because to be honest with you, I've not had a report from any of the nonprofits that say the money that you've given us, this is what it has gone to, and this has been the outcome, and we have achieved our objective. There's not been, to me, you probably have it, but I have not seen one.
We have it. I'll distribute them directly to everybody on the board so that they can see. We'll go
That
through.
of the end of the result of the process by which they have done with the money, and their objective was achieved, and of what they said that they were going to do with it.
We have those. We can get them to you.
Thank you. Thank you, Mayor.
Okay, is there a motion as regards to the budget? Is there a second?
Second.
Moved and seconded. Any final comments? Roll call?
Yeah, Mayor, I'm going to be
Williams.
voting. Who? Oh, okay. I'm going to be voting no for philosophical reasons on the budget, on this piece of the budget.
Okay. Roll call, Madam Clerk?
Board Member Wallman,
Yes.
Board Member Burgess, Board Member Maldonado. Yes. Board Member Williams.
No?
Board Member Fairclough,
Yes.
Vice Chairman Shelley,
No.
Chairman Porter.
Yes.
The motion carries.
Any final reports? Any public comment at this point in time? Is there a motion to adjourn? Is there a motion second? All in favor?
Aye.
Meeting adjourned.